Me, myself, and I. It's just me, myself, and I.
Ain't nobody talking when I'm talking, fellas, so shut the fuck up.
The dog is belly up.
I'll drive a headlock, got you in the gridlock. Catch me in the back lot, I can make the mat rock. Backdrop, hip toss, abdominal stretch. Now they wondering who we bombing on next, yes.
The dog is belly up.
Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.
You ain't heard it like this before. They don't do it like this no more. They get on that, they get on that, they get on that, pop on that.
Oh, Stephen, there's one more thing I have to mention.
What is it?
I love you.
The dog is belly up.
If they don't give me proper credit, I just walk away.
Patos locos forever.
Forever!
Forever.
Full disclosure, news and commentary number 154, 154, 154, 154, 154. Goofball. What's going on? Full disclosure, 154. That means we are two away from the 3rd year anniversary show. It's insane. New intro. I just thought it was time. I thought it would be fun. And of course it took a whole lot of time. But I'm going to crank this thing out before I have to go to work. Lots to talk about. Our commentary is going to be about Big E. What happened to him and stuff to reflect upon. I was gonna say who to blame for his injury, but I don't think that's really appropriate to say it like that. But we are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the state of wrestling and what has brought that whole thing about and what it says about wrestling fans and wrestling in general and how things have changed for the good and the ill. My kid's just going to be swimming in the background enjoying this day. You gotta love Florida, man. Of course, my kid went swimming yesterday, even when it was freaking cold. Somebody, when I commented about this on Facebook, somebody asked the dumb thing, well, what's Florida cold? I'm like, it was Florida cold. And 50 degrees. And the night before, it was, right around that, and which means the water was just freaking way colder than anybody should want to swim. But kids, man, bulletproof. Huge weekend. I know it seems like I'm saying that every weekend, but it was a huge weekend in wrestling in the Southeast in general, Georgia in particular. That's not to say that all the stuff is going to be about Georgia. One bad thing about doing this outside is it's so much harder to see stuff, but we will persevere. Larry Goodman. Hey, by the way, gwhnewsandnotes.blogspot.com. There's so much good stuff up there right now. I hasten to mention I was not at IWE, which some people noted. I'm just working too much. I will be at the next IWE show, but from all accounts, things went really well. And Matt Hankins was there to help things along in my stead. And they did great. Over 250 people there. Tim is shooting for a sellout of that building, their next show. I love that he sort of threw it out there. Tim has done that a lot. He kind of throws himself out there. I think the really great promoters do. And then he's just going to match what he says he's going to do. I'm going to be there to help him do it. The show itself, fantastic. I love Joe Black turning heel. I love the addition of Tyreek as his manager. That's going to be a lot of fun to see where that goes. The exotic youth thing continues to fly on. I'm going to have something to say. I'm going to have another promo to cut at Bryce Cannon this week. And a whole bunch of other great stuff happening. You know, always really great to see Anthony Henry sort of getting his due as well. Lots to talk about with that IWE show. I think Charles is going to have that report up post haste. But let's talk about Larry Goodman. Let's talk about Larry Goodman getting up the reports about Pro South, Puerto Rican News and Notes, the SCI Rumble report by Rob Rod. Really great stuff. In my opinion, Rob Rod's writing is improving by leaps and bounds, and I'm glad to see it. Larry reporting on that Mucha Lucha Atlanta show. Folks, 1,300 people drawn. Close to 2,000 according to Mucha Lucha. And the results coming in for Mucha Lucha, which is wonderful to see. Platinum Championship Wrestling, it's not often, you know, people try to come up with their own version of a match all the time, and I think Platinum Championship Wrestling definitely did so. That idea of having 5 people that you could use for 30 seconds at a time to help you out, I thought it was a really clever idea when you got Bill the Butcher and Naja going at it. There's so much creativity. There's so much wonderful stuff happening. League's on the upswing. ICW No Holds Barred report from Jeff is not only wonderfully written, as Jeff always does, but he really pulled you into that feeling. And I have to say that I went out of my way to watch the show. Again, it's really hard when you're working, you know, usually 3 p.m. until after midnight. And then sometimes in the early morning as well at my other job. It's hard to get stuff in. I think this is the week where I really figure out my schedule. I sat down and literally laid out a schedule so I could get videos done. And I went through the process of catching up with all of the Platinum pinfalls, which was nuts, but I decided I just didn't want to let anybody else down, and I didn't want to let myself down. So even though a lot of that news is going to be somewhat old, I'm still getting all of that stuff done, really to prove it to myself. But you look at that ICW No Holds Barred report, and Casey Kirk, who I absolutely adore, getting this great moment. And what was exciting was getting messages from people that I know, like Duke Ingram, who was at the show, just saying what an incredible experience that death match is. I wrote once, probably around a year ago, that deathmatch is the wrestling that is left to us. And I stand by that. And if you look at the presence of, like, you know, Game Changer Wrestling, which can only be considered a success. I told Larry, like, you know, they would draw between 3 and 6, and they drew 6. They drew on the high end. No, it wasn't a sellout, but they drew a great crowd in Atlanta. And ICW had a packed house for their show, so in Tennessee. And so that's absolutely wonderful. The only thing I think is a negative is that Iceberg couldn't be there at ICW for the show honoring him. And I you know, Iceberg is somebody, I'm just going to put the call out. People need to give that dude his roses. Man, they need to give that guy his love. Kudos to ICW for being willing to do that. Kudos to Dan and Tank for absolutely killing it all weekend. All I heard was this great stuff. That spot of Tank double backdrops out, double Samoa dropping Brandon and Kate. I freaking went nuts. Dan taking the light tube bundle, man. It's just such a delight when you see your friends and people that you respect and love doing so great. WrestleAmerica, which I don't think WrestleAmerica gets enough love. And now sometimes it's because the shows aren't doing so well, but this show, they had a crowd count of 160. Rob Rod was there to write the report. It's great to see. It's always great to see WrestleAmerica doing their thing. That GCW report from Goodman. And again, people have lamented for years, which I think is really stupid, about the fact that Larry talks about crowds and talks about gates. Folks, that's what this stuff is. And I love that he's doing it. And if you got 600 people, that's impressive enough. If you get 600 people paying $35.70 a ticket, that's a whole different thing, isn't it? But he's very honest about the crowd reactions and all of that stuff. Larry is a treasure. Iceberg is a treasure. And gwhnewsandnotes.com is a frickin' treasure. Congratulations to all the shows that did their thing. Wrestling is incredibly strong right now. I want to talk about Scott Hall. So as of now, he is on life support. He suffered a series of heart attacks. And I get, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. I get that people's instinct is like, he's going to kick out of this and all this stuff. Folks, everybody dies. And Scott Hall, he's going to die. And right now they're just keeping him on life support so they could get his family together and everybody can say goodbye. And it's incredibly sad. And I know people have this instinct. We saw this when Jimmy Rave died. We've seen this when other people have died. That people feel the need to, at that point, state their opinion about the kind of person they were, or they're going to transition. And maybe you're one of these people that are going to write like, oh, you know, Scott Hall did a lot of scummy things in his life, but you know what? Do me a favor. Just don't be dicks. Like, there's really no need. What good can come of it, right? Do you need to seem like the all-knowing God of the universe, that it's just like, they were imperfect people? You know what? I've been reading a ton of Lone Wolf and Cub and rewatching Breaking Bad, because Lone Wolf of Lone Wolf and Cub and Walter White in Breaking Bad, both 50. I'm 50. So that stuff is really, as the kids say, hitting me differently. And something they said in Lone Wolf, which I thought was amazing, is there's no enemies in the grave. In other words, once people die, you just kind of let some shit go. That said, Scott Hall, it's incredibly sad. And whatever you want to say about the dude, that is a fucking life lived, for sure. And I'm glad. Now, some people will say like, well, you know, he cleaned up and did the DDP yoga, and in the end, everybody dies, folks. But the quality of his life that he got to have the last few years, which otherwise I think would have been much worse, I think that is a wonderful thing. And I was glad to see Buff Bagwell, who's somebody I do not particularly care for. But am I happy to see that it appears that right now the DDP yoga thing and that whole experience is helping him? I think that it's great. No enemies in the grave. Take that away from this. And another thing that I'm taking away from it is Jake Roberts. What a tough motherfucker. Holy crap. But Scott Hall, man, I think he and Jake, there's a lot of parallels there. They both had their incredibly embarrassing public moments. They both had these careers that were great, including some of the best stuff ever, yet never achieved that sort of world title status, whatever that means in fake fighting in your underwear land. But again, there's going to be a lot of people who talk about Scott Hall and a lot of people who give him his roses. And that's why when I sort of put out there, give these guys their roses, it's not because people aren't doing it, but it's because I think it's a reminder to all of us, including myself, that we need to be more effusive in our praise, and we need to express ourselves in a positive way more. You know, I've gotten a lot of messages and conversations about last week's Full Disclosure, where I went ham in that way that I do. But my transition this week is a reminder that, yes, I'm always out to call out a motherfucker, and I'm always out to do what I do. But at the same time, I'm an optimist, which sounds kind of crazy, but I think I'm an optimist almost beyond reason. And I have an unfailing belief in myself, in spite of my shortcomings and at times letting myself down. And part of the reason I think that people like me, and I think there are people that do, is because the older I get, the more honest as far as just telling people. And I just don't have those barriers, those social barriers of fear that a lot of people do. And I would invite you to do the same. Cool. Simon Sermon. So Richard Borger, I've alluded to this recently. Richard Borger, formerly of Face to Face, was trying to bring criminal proceedings against Simon Sermon for all this ridiculous shit. You'll be happy to know that I got texts from the man, Simon Sermon, letting me know that the judge threw that crap out right away, and that Richard Borger is ridiculous, and fuck Dick and his bullshit. And if he's going to try to sue me or whatever, fuck him, fuck his mother, fuck them all. Fuck his stupid face-to-face name that I absolutely fucking hate. And the fact that he's just trying to fuck with people now who have been nothing but kind to him, nothing but help him in his ridiculous endeavors. Fuck him, fuck him, fuck him 100 times over at his fake poser bullshit fucking ass. Fuck him. And yay to Simon Sermon. He's a fucking good dude who helps a lot of people out and does a lot for the wrestling business and is a good man. And Tony, his husband, is fucking wonderful as well. And Richard Borger, everything I've heard about you is you're a dumb piece of shit, so fuck you and your mother. Cool. Commentary. I may put up this picture, I may not, but there's Big E, man. So for those that don't know, took an overhead belly to belly, landed on his head, and blame is being assessed all around. But I don't think it's about the guy delivering the move necessarily. Though in a perfect world, I think Taz said it best, suplex is about technique, not about bull strength, right? But that's less important than the condition that brought us here. And that is that spot shouldn't happen anyway. Right? And you're like, Steve, you love deathmatch wrestling, and Steve, you love AEW, and you love like this sort of transitional like spot style of wrestling. You're cool with the modern thing, you love the old school thing. All that is true. But what are the things that led to this move? That's what I want to talk about. And these are all my opinions, but see if they don't hold up. It's Big E wanting him to look great. It's Big E calling that spot out for himself, I'm sure. And trusting. And at the end of the day, especially in the WWE, even if they execute that move perfectly, does it put over the guy that delivered the move as much as it used to? Absolutely not. But Big E is a wrestler's wrestler, and his thinking was, I'm going to make this guy look good. I'm going to have him throw me around. I'm going to do my job to the best of the ability. Even though I was kind of fucked out of my title and shunted off and made to be unimportant at an unimaginable speed, even for the WWE, I'm still going to continue to do my job and elevate people and help them as much as I can at the cost of my own body. And the cost is big. His neck is broken, though he's not going to require surgery, apparently. And he will return, and he's keeping everything really positive, because that's who that fucking guy is. He's a great dude. But I often, when something really terrible happens, and I talk about it with my friends, I say this other thing. Now, I love that my thing of what good can come of this has caught on, and I think that's wonderful. Well, here's another one that you can add that I say. And for what? When something really horrible happens, I tend to go, and for what? Meaning, what was the payoff of even attempting such a thing? Was it necessary? And yes, I understand, wrestling. To me, it's about blood and violence and all that stuff. But you have to, I would urge everybody, and this is the main part of this, to weigh the potential payoff when assessing the risk. And if the risk far outweighs the potential payoff. Because, like I said, let's say they executed that move perfectly. Does it really put the guy over? Does it even generate additional interest in the match, or a huge pop, or lead to a significant finish? Or is it just a transition move that happens to be an incredibly dangerous one? Every move is dangerous. Like, people always cite that as an excuse for bad things happening, right? Like, oh, well, shit happens. Yeah, of course, right? Everything has a percentage chance of going wrong. So what you have to assess is the potential payoff to what is happening worth the risk, semi-minute though it may be, that you are taking? And I would say for that spot, it was definitely not worth the risk. And that's what I would urge wrestlers and wrestling people, and even wrestling fans who are assessing stuff. Let's look at the potential reward for the risk. If Rey Fenix continues to wrestle 2 matches and then takes 6 months off, he has to assess, where can I fucking determine it's not worth not having me for half the year for one spot? And you got to ask yourself, what is the reward comparable to the risk? And young people, I'll say this, because you feel invincible and because you think 1% chance isn't a very high chance, folks, let me tell you, it's everything. How many bumps are you going to take? And what are the risks on each one of those bumps compiled on top of each other? I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is be smart and be selective. The difference between AJ Styles now and AJ Styles in TNA, where he's taking these ridiculous bumps off of the Ultimate X and all this other shit, is I think he's a smarter, when you can still go physically, but you make the spots count more. That's the perfect juxtaposition in the crossroads that you're looking for. I want you to be safe. I want you to have fun. And I want you to get everything possible out of a spot. And part of that is assessing risk reward. Again, it's not one of those sexy things. It's like when I said recently, one in the past few years where I went, it's about controlling costs as much as it's about how many people can you draw. And I was mocked by the fucking stupid promoters, all of whom, by the way, are out of business. All the ones who had something to say about when I said it's about, controlling costs and fucking mock that shit, they're all out of business because they didn't control their costs. So I'm telling you, wrestling people, it is about risk assessment on these spots. Be safe. I love you. Join my Patreon. I am so close to 30. It's very exciting. And I will see you on the flip side. And this...
Let's follow this closet.
Can't say it any better than that.